Today we're diving into something that sits right at the intersection of trauma, neuroscience, and the future of mental health care. MDMA-assisted therapy.
Today I want to talk about MDMA not as a recreational drug, but as a potential new treatment in medicine. And a very important treatment for psychiatry, because MDMA could offer us in psychiatry for the first time the opportunity to tackle trauma. And psychological trauma, particularly that caused by child abuse and maltreatment, is at the heart of all or most psychiatric disorders due to anxiety and addictions.
Let's talk about those people you meet who are so miserable, so full of pain that their energy almost feels toxic. People who have experienced so much trauma, betrayal, and loss that they don't even know who they'd be without it. And here's the thing that most people don't realize. Their defenses aren't just psychological, they're also physiological. Trauma rewires your brain. It reshapes the amygdala, suppresses the prefrontal cortex, and keeps the body in a chronic fight or flight loop.
Anxiety isn't just worrying too much. It's a psychological and neurological condition where the brain locks into survival mode, constantly scanning for threats, real or imagined. For those who live with it, anxiety feels like being trapped in a storm of racing thoughts, restless energy, and a body that never fully relaxes. It's not weakness, and it's not simply overthinking. It's the nervous system misfiring, turning everyday life into a battlefield. Neurologically, anxiety is driven by the amygdala, the brain's alarm system. When it becomes overactive, even minor stressors are treated as danger. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex, which normally helps regulate fear and calm the system, struggles to take control. Neurotransmitters like serotonin, norepinephrine, and GABA are often disrupted, leading to hyperarousal, tense muscles, shallow breathing, and intrusive thoughts. This explains why anxiety is as physical as it is mental.
It's not mindset, it's biology. But if I'm being serious, sometimes trauma is so embedded that people can't even access the part of themselves that is capable of doing the work. You can't process what your brain won't let you feel. And that's where MDMA enters the conversation.
The MDMA is creating the right conditions for somebody to feel safe, to re-engage with that memory, re-engaging with the memory, and being mindful and present in that very frightful situation, but not having that fear, is actually what brings about the healing, is the therapeutic experience.
So here's what MDMA actually does in the brain.
Chemical floods your brain with serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin, the trio responsible for happiness, reward, and connection. As the onset begins, warmth spreads through your body. Music sounds richer, lights shimmer, and touch feels electric. You feel deeply connected to friends, to strangers, to everything around you. The brain is running on maximum empathy.
This creates a sense of safety that trauma survivors haven't felt in years. It's almost like they're wrapped in a big weighted blanket. People can revisit traumatic memories without being hijacked of shame. They don't have that burden of trauma. Your body stops treating your trauma like a current threat. And in that window, real therapeutic work becomes possible. Now let's talk about the benefits. You get significant reductions in PTSD symptoms, even those who have tried countless therapies without any success. Long-term improvements, not just a temporary high, and some patients still report relief years later. You don't hear that too much in psychiatry. And this isn't hypothetical. We have clinical trials, peer-reviewed studies, and neurological imaging backing all of that up. And this is what's also insane and enraging to me. MDMA therapy is still illegal in the United States, unless approved for research studies.
Between 54 and 72, all had moderate to severe PTSD for decades. They had all tried medicines, they'd all tried psychotherapy. In some cases, maybe it had helped in certain ways, but it had not helped them get over the PTSD. After 3 sessions of MDMA and the supportive integration and prep sessions, none of them qualified for a PTSD diagnosis at the end of the protocol. They all kept saying, I just felt like I was broken, that I was going to be living with this. And they were all just so grateful to get their lives back. Instead of going out and encountering people in the world and being on the defensive because of their PTSD, they found that they were able to just be with people and to be able to share with people, and all those walls felt like they come down. So profound shifts in these folks' functioning and their mental health as a result of 3 sessions.
The only safe legal pathway is through those clinical trials or expanded access programs. And I would recommend to go on maps.org if you want to seek out further information. Because the difference between clinical grade MDMA and street drug Molly is significant. It's kind of equivalent to a pharmaceutical fentanyl versus whatever someone decides to mix up in their basement. Purity and safety matter in real therapeutic settings. It's not about getting high. It's about creating a temporary neurochemical environment where healing becomes possible. You're not escaping your trauma. You're finally able to face it without drowning in it. And when you pair that with integration work, that's where real transformation happens. So here's my closing thought. Some people's pain has turned into a fortress. These people that can't do talk therapy, they're not broken. It simply means that they might need another kind of therapy. MDMA is literally powerful enough to be a total game changer in psychiatry. It's not a band-aid. Some researchers and psychiatrists even describe it as, dare I say, cure. Because we don't use the word cure in psychiatry, not because it erases trauma, because it finally allows the brain to process it in a way that it sticks. But let's be honest, we live in a system where chronic conditions are profitable. Long-term medications, endless appointments, revolving door psychiatry. You see the same patients over and over because that's where the money is. Let's not fool ourselves. This doesn't fit neatly into the mental health business model. And can you imagine a therapy that requires only a few sessions with results that can last years? Do you think Big Pharma wants that? That's not exactly the revenue stream the industry is built on. When something has the potential to dramatically reduce lifetime pharmaceutical dependence, it doesn't always get enthusiasm you'd expect from an industry run by profit. Because if something can help people heal instead of manage, connect instead of numb, live instead of just survive, why wouldn't we fight for that?
So, does it work? Well, we've known about MDMA for a very long time, and indeed we've used MDMA in underground therapy for 30 or 40 years. And there are thousands of positive anecdotal cases. I get 5 emails a week from all over the world. Dr. Sessa, I've had PTSD for years, I've tried everything, and now I tried MDMA and I'm starting to make a breakthrough. Now, anecdotal reports like that are interesting, but they're not science. So we've done the science, and some important studies in recent years. Big study in the States showed that a single course of MDMA therapy, 16-week course, patient takes MDMA 3 times, tested against a placebo. At the end of that course, 85% of the people no longer met the diagnostic criteria for PTSD. Not just a relief of symptoms, they didn't have PTSD. Now that cohort were then followed up 3 years later, the same, no PTSD. Many of those people had come off their daily medications. They were cured. We don't use the cure word in psychiatry. We've become learned helplessness position of, this is the truth. If you're diagnosed with a severe mental disorder like anxiety or depression in your 20s, and the developmental root of that disorder is severe child abuse, there's a pretty good chance, and I'm sorry to say this, there's a pretty good chance you will still be going to psychiatric clinics in your 60s and 70s. Now that is not good enough. And we're in this position because we're not tackling trauma. So it works. But is it safe? Well, when we think about safety of clinical MDMA, what we must not do is look at the risks of recreational ecstasy. I don't even know what ecstasy is anymore. Ecstasy's over here. What is ecstasy? That may or may not contain MDMA, plus or minus whatever far more toxic substance. And indeed, when you hear about the very high-profile deaths of people who take ecstasy, it invariably is not MDMA. So let's not look at ecstasy as a measure of MDMA. Let's look at clinical MDMA. Now, when we use clinical MDMA, you take it under medical supervision. It is pure. The MDMA that I'm using in my studies is 99.98% pure. Very expensive. We do it under medical supervision with a doctor and a nurse and a psychologist. And under those conditions, the risks are reduced to an absolute minimum. Indeed, after 40 years of MDMA research, there has not been a single serious adverse drug reaction. Not one. And certainly no deaths. So we need to do this research. And we need to do this research in an evidence-based, compassionate way, looking at the data. We need to ignore the socio-political agenda that says any drug that's being used recreationally must also be very bad and dangerous. That sort of attitude hampers research. And we need scientists to drive this. It works, it's safe. So where are we going with MDMA research? Well, we've had some studies. We've got more coming here. I'm doing a study in Cardiff with neuroimaging, in which we're going to give patients with PTSD MDMA and placebo, and we're going to look at that relationship between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. We're also doing a study here in Bristol, giving patients with alcohol use disorder MDMA, because underlying the root of this addiction is trauma. So this is an exciting time. Now, people say, this is controversial, and indeed, I was introduced as a controversial speaker. I'm not controversial, I'm a very boring conservative doctor. I like data. I like evidence-based data that helps my patients. I'll tell you what's controversial. What's controversial is that more people have died returning from Afghanistan and Iraq because they've committed suicide because of their untreated PTSD than ever died in the conflict out there. That is controversial, and that is unethical. So, this is an important time for science. MDMA could be the antibiotic that psychiatry has been waiting for. We owe that population of patients who are being failed, we owe them this research.